All right, good morning, gentlemen. Bob here, back once again, breaking down some Bitcoin. Let's get right down to it. No messing around. Daily chart in front of us here. Bitcoin looking like trash. Well, I mean, it's holding up okay for now, but I mean, it doesn't look amazing still. I mean, we got this trend line here going back to where we peaked out recently at about 48,000. You got this lower trend line that was, again, I've talked about it a few times. I mean, is the trend line perfect? No, but, it cuts through here, acted as support basically all through there until it was lost and it's been turned into resistance. So right now it's just resistance, right? We're not cracking that line. And yeah, that's problematic. So what I would see here, I'm looking for one of two things to play out here. Now, if we come down here to the RSI, you can see that we more or less double topped here on the RSI, so we're getting some downside pressure. What I think the big thing that we need to see today out of Bitcoin, honestly, don't be surprised if it comes back down in here today into this 26, 27-ish range. Don't be surprised if we see that today, tomorrow, whatever. And really, the simple thought process here would be, all right, if I'm looking at this RSI, and I look at this RSI level right here, that low was right there, okay? As of right this moment, we've got an equivalent low, basically. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that is an equivalent low. And yet we've got an RSI that is slightly higher. Thus, there is a slight bullish divergence there, okay? Now, in order to get a good, strong bullish divergence, what would end up needing to happen is Bitcoin would come down here, test out one of these levels, down below this line potentially, or maybe just to it, maybe just 28.8-ish range holds up. But what I would look for is, again, a wick down below. It's going to more than likely still be a bullish divergence if it comes down. That will then get bought up. That could be an opportunity for us to get on out of there, right? That would be a potential opportunity to get a nice strong move tomorrow based on the idea that we break down a little bit today before recovering up out of there. Now, that's assuming that the RSI actually does hold this level, right? That's an important detail. I don't have a trend line in here yet because I don't really think that this pattern is deserving of a trend line at the moment. We had this small parabolic formation that came in over the weekend, which Matt and I were talking about. I'm like, man, it's going to do this exact thing, and it did. It actually broke above this level, and then it just didn't hold it. So this is really the line in the sand at the moment. Is just like 31,000 range. Had we broken above that and held it, well, this thing would have come up to around here before getting rejected. Now we've got to look at it and say, all right, well, we didn't get that move. We didn't get the support we needed. So now we've got to look at what we've got to work with here, and it's not necessarily a beautiful thing. Now, I think at the end of the day, what we're probably going to end up with here, again, maybe we come down here, get a wick down here, hopefully find support here. That'll give us a double bottom. And then tomorrow you see this thing fire up, and maybe it only comes up to here, wicks up to here. Then the next day, so maybe think of it that it could end up being something similar to that once we get this day out of the way, if we get this pullback to where it could potentially go and that gets bought up, all of a sudden tomorrow, as long as, again, we close the day here, all of a sudden tomorrow we actually do continue to push to the upside of this little pattern here, which as of right now is a bull flag. And I want to point this out for the simple fact, or excuse me, not a bull flag, but a bear flag. And I'm pointing this out for the simple fact that we just experienced one of those right here, right? What happened once Bitcoin could no longer hold the bear flag? Well, it fell pretty hard. So the reality is Bitcoin, if things are not going to come off the rails here, Bitcoin needs to find some way to hold this, right? And right now we've got a positive in that as of this very moment, Bitcoin is holding this level that it held back here previously and then bounced up off of strong. But again, we talked about this. This was a bullish pattern. This was essentially a falling wedge that had a fake out right here, a bullish fake out. This was a falling wedge. This is not a falling wedge. This is a bearish pattern. This was a bullish one. This is a bearish pattern. So the reality is we probably do see some more downside. Now, I was watching, and I've talked about this guy a few times. I've got people that I like to watch on YouTube. BC Backer is the guy's name. And I was watching his vid this morning, and it occurred to me a few different things. And let's go ahead and go large scale on this thing, just so we can kind of talk about this just very briefly. Let's go weekly scale. Let's go ahead and clean this thing up, so that way we don't have pictures or anything impacting our ability to see. Now, the interesting thing is, to a large extent, this guy right here, well, it was more of a bull flag than it was a falling wedge, but we still kind of had a bit of a falling wedge, and maybe if I drew the trend through here, but I find it interesting that we do kind of have this larger scale falling wedge. And what I thought was most interesting about it was that eventually Bitcoin did manage to find some support in this range. Now, granted, keep in mind the moving average. And actually, let's do one other thing here. Let's go to the BLX here, so we have a little more history to work with. All right, so again, here's what I'm kind of thinking, right? So I've talked about falling wedges plenty of times before. You get a very specific pattern that emerges. So let's say that this was our falling wedge pattern. Here's the trend line. Here's a trend line. Well, and this actually shows up on my other chart. And then again, we talked about this. This whole thing is a falling wedge, and it's getting close to the point where it can only go so much further down. So I mean, there's some light at the end of the tunnel, I think, for sure. And again, we've talked about it plenty of times. Do we stop here? Do we stop here? Where do we stop? Well, it's interesting because, again, falling wedge patterns, they play out a very specific way. So if we take the idea that this itself, this area here, let's say that was a falling wedge, well, it's already doing exactly what it was supposed to. You've got this line here. You've got this line here. It is totally normal and actually expected that when you get a breakout of a falling wedge, that the retest will actually come in slightly lower than the breakout location, at which point you actually, like, this would be a totally typical retest of a falling wedge pattern. Now, the only concern I have is that instead of staying outside of the falling wedge, it actually fell back into it. And if I put some lines here, you'd see that there is some feasibility that it did fall back in. I don't know. Again, but I was looking at this morning, and I said, you know what? If I call this a falling wedge to a large extent, this did exactly what a falling wedge should. It broke out, came back and back tested to a lower point, and then just absolutely erupted from there. So again, I think that there is still some. Not to say that we're about to start a new bull cycle. I don't think, I think I've talked about this enough. I don't think that that's a reality. Again, I think that it's far more likely that at some point here in the future we are going to be testing something down, here or even lower. And that does mean that, in fact, we will lose the 200 simple moving average. But at this point, there's really no choice. It's either got to bounce off of there and go on to 100,000+, or it's going to fall below it, and we're going to go into a protracted bear cycle for the next decade plus, probably. So we talked about that enough. But I do think that there's at least something to be said about the idea that this. Now, granted, there's also a double top within this falling wedge, and there are other patterns in play, a rising channel of sorts. So, I mean, it's not the only thing, but I think that when we take a look at the concept here, if it is a falling wedge, it did exactly what it was supposed to do, okay? Now, if it's not, and let's say that I put this line over here, and then we've got this line here. Now, this is just a falling channel. Best case scenario, this thing rebounds, would come up to around here, 41,000, and then it's going to fall some more. And maybe that's where we actually put in, the retest of the 200. So let's picture this for a moment. Let's get a drawing out here just so we can kind of show what we're talking about. And then let's go back to full screen mode. So let's say for a second that we've got this, falling channel here, right? So then at that point, the likelihood is we still bounce off of this line, and maybe it kind of looks like this. And then if we don't break out of there, that's when we come back down, and you would think that it would come here, but the reality is it could stop right there at the 200 to get that final push. And then if we take this, let's get back out of full screen mode, and then let's say we go ahead and we take this measured move here, and let's say that we finally get a breakout. Maybe it ends up right. Let's move this over. Let's say that the breakout comes in, and it's actually like right here, for instance. So that would give us, so we kind of get this. Oops, let's fix that. So we kind of get this scenario where maybe we. Come on. So we get this double bottom right here. So the breakout takes place somewhere in here. All of a sudden, we're right back up there to 54,000, which is ultimately the number that I keep talking about that's probably going to end up being the cap for Bitcoin at the end of this bull cycle. And again, that would fit into a lot of different scenarios I'm looking at here, right? Like this rounded top pattern that potentially exists. That would be totally logical, because Bitcoin will come up here and it's just going to get rejected. Once it loses this line, that's when we're going to start seeing nasty stuff, assuming, of course, this ends up being the valid pattern, which, again, I'll just reiterate why I think that is. You find me another point in Bitcoin's history where it double topped at any stage, right? That's not a double top. That's not a double top. That's not a double top. Now, it is on the RSI, and that's where you get this, the bear cycle started. But, again, not a double top. Double top, finally. Only one in the history of Bitcoin, double top right here. What would you typically look for to see the end of a, let's hear it. Let's actually zoom in on the action over here. What ultimately turned this one around? This is a rounded bottom pattern that ultimately it just, when it broke out of the rounded bottom, it just continued in a parabolic fashion. But what changed the course of this? Double bottom. Changed the course of this rounded bottom. So again, it would be incredibly common to see this be the thing that pushes this down and starts the downward trend. So again, I'll just keep reiterating this, and I want people to, again, does it happen for a while? Probably not. This bull cycle, the end of it could still be a year away. I mean, we could be sitting over here dealing with this garbage for another couple of months. I mean, even if we took this concept that, we're in this falling channel right here. Let's take that concept again. We're here. We start to recover. We come up here. Can't make it through. Come back down. Double bottom. Even that's September. Which actually, if we sit here and think logically about that, what again, let's think about the fact that the summer traders, and I don't know the accuracy of it, but again, a lot of traders would take this time of year off, right? It's the summer. They made a lot of money, and they want to take the time off, so they go ahead and do that. So you see volumes just get absolutely peppered during the summertime. When is it that things typically start to come back? School time. So yeah, I mean, I just, there's some logic to that, probably something that we ought to keep in mind. But let's get in on the shorter term time frames, and I want to show you exactly what I'm looking at right now, because Bitcoin's really at a point where it's got to make a decision, and I think by looking at this chart right now, I would say that the decision is being made. It needs to hold this line. We started talking in this video this morning about the daily chart and the idea that Bitcoin could probably come down, retest some of these levels down here. Okay, we talked about this already this morning. I'm still of that mindset, right? I'm still looking at this saying, wow, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if it came down here. Now, again, on the daily chart, this will be fine, because the reality is, if the daily chart falls into here, we will get a bullish divergence. It's just, I don't know that we necessarily end the day way up here. If we come back up here and we say like we can't break back into this pattern, that's a bearish retest, more downside. So again, I'm looking at everything, and I'm still seeing at least the feasibility for more downside, and that's, in the video that you guys couldn't hear the other day, that was part of what I talked about. Is there's all this talk about all these people opening all these longs right in this area. Well, yeah, I mean that's great, they're opening, but if they didn't open them right here and say they opened them right here, they're back to even right now already, just within 48 hours, right? So again, this market wants to prevent people from making money. It wants to take the most money from the most people. All of a sudden, you got all these people here. Oh man, the market's, all these longs are spiking, so they're ready to get in. But like we talked about, when people started loading up on shorts, it took almost 2 weeks before Bitcoin finally gave up the goods, right? Like before finally Bitcoin's like, all right, I capitulate. And then all of a sudden we get this garbage, right? Like this ridiculous, insane, like it just started here. But again, this whole time we're sitting here butting up against 40K. And then here, finally, boom, capitulate. Now, if we have a similar concept play out here, then that means at some point we are going to get a bear trap that's just going to absolutely roast to the upside and look probably very similar to what this downside looked like. We just got to get there first, and we got to scare enough participants into believing that, in fact, there is significantly more downside. Whereas at least for right now, and again, I'll just kind of clarify again, I can sit here and tell you that my long-term target on Bitcoin is, 14,000 or 10,000 or 2,000. I can tell you all those numbers, but again, I'm not telling you that that's going to happen today, right? I'm in no way, shape, or form am I sitting here claiming that we're going to fall to that today or that it's going to happen soon. That's just a long-term target. It's the market doesn't fall in a straight line except for those couple of days here, right? Like that's totally atypical of what markets do. That's totally not commonplace behavior for the market. So it's going to bounce a lot in between there. Now, do I think that it's going to just fall in and capitulate into nothing? I still don't think so. But I do think that if we look at this logically, and let's just go ahead, I'm going to make just a temporary adjustment on this chart, even though I guess I could change it up altogether. But let's go ahead and make a few quick changearoos here. Let's call that the top line at this point. Right? Let's go with this guy right here, because that looks like it's probably withheld most of the... now, a 1.618, that would be a golden pocket move right there, 26,133. If we base it off of that level there, that would be a totally typical scenario. And then this guy here, 22,774. Again, why this level is important is because guess what? Just to reiterate, let's go ahead and go to the weekly chart real briefly, and we'll just go ahead and point out once again, where is the 200 simple? Right down there in that range. Totally typical. This would not be an uncommon experience to see that down there. However, and again, coming back out, let's get a larger scale view going here. We've got, this is essentially, well, it's slightly off on the weekly chart. Let's move it over to the daily chart and then clean. Well, it's not very clean, obviously, but again, and this is slightly off at this point, but I'm essentially calling this the bottom of our falling channel or falling wedge. This is the bottom that we want to hold up, right? This is not necessarily the bottom. It's just the bottom we want to hold up, because again, there's still this downside here that we are back inside of this falling channel. And let's see. Let me actually... I could go ahead and add one more right here around this price action that would help as well. But again, the long and short of this is simply the fact that if we hold this trend line here, if we put one through and we hold that, that's what we want to see, right? That's exactly what we want to see. And as of right now, that would in fact be holding up. Now again, the biggest thing is though, when you see reversals come off of these bottoms of patterns, it doesn't just bounce right off of it and just take off, right? It typically takes some effort, some bouncing to actually maintain those lines. And especially after it's had a big downward move, it's going to take some time to consolidate, let people feel comfortable with the marketing in before it gets pushed back to the upside. So that's really probably the biggest thing I would say is that, again, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. However, it's obviously not perfect either at the moment. But and again, this, especially on smaller time frames, I mean, this thing's just fitting right in here just way too well. This rounded top. So here's where the problem comes in. If this thing truly ends up being a rounded top, then, you know, just like with that rounded bottom I showed you on this full scale weekly, or on the full scale Bitcoin chart, this rounded bottom reacted one way. It went straight parabolic. When you get rounded bottoms or rounded tops, they come out of these one of two ways. It's either straight parabola, which that was a positive here, right? That was a good thing. Or you begin to, or you come back to the neckline of it. So let's say that this 4-hour chart, this ends up being the neckline. The other scenario would be you get a cup and a handle. And the handle itself would probably end up looking something very similar. Let's say that ends up being it. Like, we may end up coming out of here hardcore, right? Like, when you get the handle can be just basically straight line type stuff. So we're either going to go ahead and parabolic downside, which sounds absolutely terrible. And the measured move there would be down to approximately... Let's see. Running out of real estate here. And then so this would take us all the way down into this 25-ish range if we get a full measured move out of there. Otherwise, then we come back out, we pop up off of it, and we start this upward trend line and to come back up to here. Then all of a sudden, this looks like a beautiful double bottom pattern, right? This would be a bottom. We would form a bottom somewhere over here. All of a sudden, then we've got this beautiful double bottom pattern. Then Bitcoin comes up here, reclaims that level. All of a sudden, we are sitting at 35,000 and change, which is not drastically far off from the 236 fib level that we lost over here that Bitcoin is ultimately going to try to recover to. Now, the big thing would be that we've got this 200 simple moving average coming down that's going to act potentially as resistance. And you can see that, depending on how soon this would all happen, this would be a perfectly logical place for the action to get stopped out. So that's what I'm going to be looking for most likely and primarily is this thing to come down into here, probably come down to this level, at least potentially, 26,133. Maybe even come down here, put in a wick. Now, again, this is going to be the biggest issue. I don't want to see this thing wick below here probably, maybe not even here, because, again, we've talked about this. There are a lot of, whales that have their stop losses stacked in here and all the way down to around here. All those stop losses start to trigger, and all of a sudden you're going to see a cascading effect, and this thing just dump right through all these levels. And, again, probably stopping somewhere in this range, but that's the part we don't want to see. So I'm far more inclined to hope and believe this ends up being the absolute bottom for this move, and then a recovery back up, and say we close out the day, whatever day this happens, we close out here, put in our double bottom. Look, at this point, I'm not totally convinced that we're going to sell off and then spike right back up to here today. That it seems far-fetched to me. Well, could it happen? Sure. I'm not counting on it. If we wick down here, I'd love to see it just close out right here and then go ahead and put a handle on this thing and blast off out of there. And again, recover up to about 35,000 would be my expectation. So, got some things I'm looking at here. It's funny, as I'm recording this video, you can see, obviously, Bitcoin, we got this red candle here. And, it's not like big red, right? Like, it's not massive red. But I'm sitting here, and I got XRP and, over on this chart over here. And I'll just bring it in for a second just so you can see just how beat down it is. I saw this last night, and I was telling Matt, I'm like, man, Bitcoin, XRP's right at the top of a pattern. Bitcoin's looking bullish right here. But I'm like, man, no way it breaks out. And it didn't. And you got this just total, trash looking stuff right here. Now, look, this line right here is the line in the sand. I mean, I think, if Bitcoin is going to come back down and retest some levels like down here in this 26 range, I think that means that XRP realistically, where the heck did it go? There it is. I think that means realistically XRP is going to retest this 33 cent range. And I think, honestly, this, I don't know if I've told this story before. When I first started in crypto, the only thing I bought was XRP. And I only did that because a buddy of mine that I worked with at the time, he's like, man, XRP, blah, blah, blah. I was like, all right, whatever. This is crypto stuff. I don't understand it. Like, I don't get it, so I'm not going to. And then one day I finally decided, I got some money sitting aside. I want to go ahead and load this up. So I bought some XRP, so it does hold a special place in my heart. But the whole point to this story is that when I first started in crypto and I bought XRP, I bought it at 30 cents, not knowing that 33 cents was like this like hard ceiling for a while, right? Like that it had been overhead resistance for a long time, hadn't broken it in God knows how long. And, I'm sitting there buying it at 30 cents thinking I'm going to the moon, right? It got to 33 cents and then it died from there. So, I'm up 10% within days, right? And I'm thinking, man, this is awesome. This will be the greatest, easiest thing ever. And then before you know it, XRP is down at like, I don't know, 23 cents again, not that far after. And then all of a sudden it spikes to 72 cents at some point, and then it dumps right back to like 18 cents. So, XRP is one of those things that holds a place in my heart for the good or the bad. But either way, my point is that 33 cent level is one that was a resistance for so long that at this point, I think it would be a totally logical scenario to believe that Bitcoin comes down, puts in a double tap back test on that level, and you can see here, so basically this was me buying originally, probably somewhere, no, they don't have enough history on this chart for me to show you where I was buying. It was like, no, it was right here we go. Yeah, it was like August of 2020, and I'm over here buying it, about 30 cents, it gets up to 33, like I said, but again, it flipped this into, this had been a resistance for a long time, flipped it to support at one point, even though here it did dip back below. But the whole point that I'm making is, XRP already came down, put in a test at this 33 cent level. It's holding for now. So now, all of a sudden, I'm looking at this saying, well, this isn't the end of the world. If it loses 33, then yeah, this sucks. XRP could go retest 19 cents again. But if XRP just simply comes down here, puts in another test at 33 cents, this is like potentially generational buying opportunity, right? Like, XRP hasn't gone anywhere near through a full Fibonacci extension during this bull cycle. And, if it did go through a full Fib extension, just even based off of this portion of it, that would get us to $6.80 from 30. So it's a 20x plus, right? So potentially some significant possibilities here now. And this is going way over, and but hopefully this is all entertaining and such. The challenge here becomes the fact that, like we just talked about with a rounded bottom, they typically come out of there one of two ways: parabolic downside or upside, depending. Or you get the handle. Well, we don't have a handle right now. We've got parabolic downside forming here. So I hadn't really taken a look at that yet until we were talking here today. But now I've got some level of concern that, yeah, maybe that does keep going down. But I still think that there's at least a chance. We'll come back down, test this 33 cent level again. Would love to see the weekly wick back up to here at least. Or not wick, but to actually find support here. Then we can resume upside. Man, if this thing keeps going down again, look at this. What's the next major support level? 24-ish cents. And then all of a sudden we're looking down here and we're like, okay, 19-ish cents. So 18 cents. Just the downside from there gets just ridiculous. So anyway, all right. I think that's enough of me talking for one day. But man, I just, And here we go. Yeah, Bitcoin already floundering some more here, down 29.5 and change. Again, just expect that we're probably going to come down here and test out something down in these lower ranges. I'm going to go ahead and get my chart put back together correctly the way that I had it before. I'm far happier with the way it looked and the way that these fib levels lined up with the price action when I had it before. So I'm going to fix that up, get back to work here, find some buys. But again, just kind of keep in mind, I mean, really, what we want to do is at this point, especially in kind of no man's land, what we really just want to do is prep for the long portion of it, right? We would like to just prep to start buying and holding long positions and then making our way back to the upside. So at this point, short of doing, a couple hour trades here and there, which is not really what we want to do for you guys, we're just waiting for this thing to show the signs of a true full-blown reversal. And if we come down here and we get some support where we need it, great. That's going to give us an opportunity to go and start that true reversal. And that's really the main thing at this point. I mean, we missed the big downside moves. Any downside moves that are available now are going to be limited in nature. Whereas, we believe at this point that once we get our official bottom for now, that this thing will in fact move back to the upside and probably move somewhere into the neighborhood of 51 to 54,000, at which point we could basically double up some money on Bitcoin, as opposed to trying to find some way to play the directions each day or each hour. So again, that's the main thing. Hey, I appreciate everybody's time. This one is probably longest video by about 3 minutes, so apologies if anybody didn't enjoy content, but alas, I will be back tomorrow with more. We appreciate you. Let's get some money. My goodness. All right. Talk soon.